Ukwakhwa, hello everyone. Welcome to Ukwakhwa, Our Foods. Today we're going to tell you our story and walk you through our seed journey so far. Our journey has not been easy because we do not come from farming families.
While we both grew up here on the Oneida Reservation, we also did not have access to our traditional teachings related to the caring of our seed relatives. We also funded the first 7 years of this journey out of our own family budget.
Money was tight, but we set our goals within reach and worked our tails off. We learned so much, yet we have so much to learn. Follow us along as we share how our community rose up to the challenge and supported us along the way.
Yo, ya won't go out on your day. Ya won't go out, Lodina Shonia. Ya won't go out, Sojina Weha. Sojina Weha, we are Hinega, now we are here.
Steve and I are both enrolled tribal citizens from the Oneida Reservation in Wisconsin.
After years of chasing her around in high school, I wore her down and convinced her to marry me.
Soon after, Steve followed me down to Madison so I could finish up my studies. After graduating law school, we came home and I became an attorney for the tribe.
And I worked for our tribe's elected officials as the records director.
After several years of practicing law, I decided I wanted to switch directions, so I returned to school to earn my PhD. In 2015, we planted, harvested, and braided up our very first white corn braid. We were hooked. In 2016, we stepped up our white corn production at home, and we also helped form Ohelagu, which is a co-op of Oneida families that grow, harvest, and braid a whole bunch of our indigenous white corn together.
Growing several acres of corn each year allows us to incorporate our indigenous corn into our regular diets and share with the community.
This was also the year we grew our indigenous beans for the first time. 2017 was the year we tapped maple trees for the first time. Also in 2017, I secured my tenure-track position as an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota Duluth and began to form a plan. The seeds were really calling to our family. I asked Steve if he wanted to sell our house, buy some vacant land, build a smaller house, and quit his job and homeschool the girls.
And I was like, sure.
So we put our idea out to the social media universe and were connected with somebody who sold us 10 acres of vacant land. Our goals for this property was to help the community to learn about Haudenosaunee agricultural methods of planting, growing, harvesting, seed keeping, food preparation, food storage, tool making, and crafting. We wanted to create a safe space for our community. We talked to a faith keeper in our community about our plans for this place, and he gave us the name Ukwakhwa Jitnu ni Unkwayaya Toslu. It means our foods, where we plant things. And this was also the year that we received more seeds from our seed mentors out east.
We wrapped up the home build in 2018. It took us almost a year, but we did it ourselves with the help of friends and family.
We loaded up a group of about 20 of us to head down to Ecuador for a cultural exchange with indigenous corn growers down there. We shared stories of our seeds, our culture, and of course, our corn husk doll making. This was some of the corn we harvested in our first year at our new place, along with a surprise grandmother corn.
This was also the first year we hosted rites of passage for our community. I am forever thankful for the opportunity to homeschool my daughters. I got to teach them one-on-one all kinds of things that I had wished that I had learned at that age.
I even got to hop in there occasionally and incorporate our traditional teachings into their classroom. A couple years ago, we worked out a trade with our friend Roger Cook, a retired Mohawk ironworker. I made some beadwork for him. In exchange, he made us this beautiful sign for our property.
This is also the year we built our gazebo. We now had a proper place for the aunties to watch over the fire for the second year rites of passage. In 2019, we hosted our very first tour. We led a busload of kids in indigenous food activities. Even though we were just a few years in, and despite everything on our plate, our harvests became exponentially more bountiful. 2020, we received a USDA grant to help us build a 90-foot high tunnel. We planted corn, beans, squash, and strawberries in there. That same year, we decided to put up a building that would eventually house our farm equipment, a commercial kitchen, a trading post, and small apartments for our daughters.
We love to showcase our annual harvests with proper photo shoots. We started to get serious about sharing our adventures on social media. In 2021, we successfully formed a 501c3 nonprofit. This allowed us to access grant funding to help us achieve our goals.
We were able to build our certified commercial kitchen, licensed and inspected through the United Nations. We immediately began to use this as a teaching space and to process our indigenous foods. Our methods aren't always sacred or OSHA approved. The kitchen provided a great resource to include indigenous meals prepared by indigenous chefs at our events.
This is also the year that our seed room got an upgrade with an Oneida Tribal Belt tiled tabletop for sorting seeds.
We kept expanding and reshaping our garden areas based on what we were learning each year. Even though we have so much more to learn, the fall harvest reflects our progress.
In 2022, we finished building out the trading post in the new building. We take visitors by appointment, but we removed money from the equation. We shouldn't base our value off of what someone is willing to pay us for our time. Everything operates on a barter system. We've traded for stuff like elk, salmon, jelly, maple syrup, and wild rice, as well as things like haircuts, singing lessons, and finding medicines in the woods. And we don't need to be extra sacred all the time. We even traded for a 1980s He-Man castle once. This empowers everyone to be a part of and comfortable with our seed adventures, even if they're still working to rekindle their relationship with our traditional foods.
As our events grew larger, we needed to expand our event space. So we built a 40 by 20 pavilion with an attached storage shed. We then secured grant funding to concrete the entire area. In 2023, we stepped up our maple production and received a generous grant from our friends in Madison, Wisconsin. This allowed us to buy a proper maple evaporator. Post-pandemic, our community resumed rites of passage, and we were able to host once again.
Because building the first high tunnel was so much fun, and because we received another grant, we decided to build a second one. We also planted 17 heritage varieties of apples. We love to showcase our seeds in these giant jars. They help demonstrate the amounts we began to grow. We grew beans for 5 years before tasting any of them because we are worried about seed saving and sharing seeds. In 2017, this was a vacant field. Since then, we built a house, a gazebo, a pavilion, a building to house our commercial kitchen and trading post, 2 high tunnels, and a pond. We created garden spaces, 2 orchards, a pollinator habitat, tree plantings, and cleared spaces for wild berries and plums.
And here she is in all her summer glory, with lots of space to celebrate our food and host our community.
Historically, our people planted the 3 sisters, corn, beans, and squash, in mounds together. The 3 sisters grow together and help each other out. The corn grows tall and strong and serves as a pole for the beans to climb. The beans put nitrogen back into the soil. The squash spreads up on the ground to prevent weeds from growing and to keep moisture in the soil. They also keep the animals out of the garden because the animals don't like to walk through their prickly stems and leaves. We learned about the proper timing to plant in mounds. We plant the corn first, then a few weeks later come in and plant the beans and squash. This gives the corn a chance to grow a bit to become strong enough to support the growing beans. This also allows the soil to warm up a bit before planting the squash, because she appreciates a little warmer soil to germinate.
The concept of using fish as fertilizer was something that was often talked about when using Three Sister mounds. We started out by putting a fish on the ground and simply building a mound over it. This resulted in raccoons quickly swooping in during the night and taking our fish. We found that burying the fish deeper was a much better method.
We also learned that the 3 sisters don't always get along. Sometimes the squash will grow up into the corn and hang like Christmas lights and eventually pull the corn down. And other times, a strong pole bean will grow into the corn and pull them down.
In order for us to better understand the mounds, we thought it would be beneficial to see what was going on below in the root structure. We made this plexiglass viewing window and modified a mound and observed it throughout the season. We saw how interconnected the roots became and provided a diverse biostructure to foster a healthy ecology.
We grew our white corn for a few years before picking green corn. The corn isn't actually green, it's just a way to say that it's not ripe yet. We were always afraid we would eat all of our seed corn and not have enough left to plant for the following year. We were also worried we didn't know the best time to pick the corn at this stage. Now that we're getting more comfortable, green corn has become one of our favorite ways to eat our corn. Of the several varieties of corn that we have grown here on the farmstead over the past few years, our grandmother corn has been quite a mystery. Each kernel is wrapped in a husk, in addition to the whole cob being wrapped in a husk. Conventionally, she's called a pod corn. We understood her to be a protector and often planted on the edges of our planting areas, but didn't know what that meant. Since our seeds are often our best mentors, we planted her and waited to see what she taught us. We learned that she is a longer growing season corn. This means that it takes longer for her kernels to grow, while the corn on the inside of the garden area finishes weeks ahead. We had a deer come along one year and munch right into a cob of this corn and noped right out of there. The grandmother corn must have been too much work and had too many husks to deal with to get at the barely formed kernels inside. She proved that she was protecting the corn growing inside the garden area. We hosted lots of groups for educational hands-on events here at the farmstead. This helps us fulfill our goals of creating that safe space for our community to reconnect to knowledge that our ancestors had to lay down just to survive. Colonization, assimilation, and removal forced much of our knowledge underground. We hope to be a continuing part of the movement that uncovers, picks up, and celebrates that knowledge. We're honored to get our hands in the dirt and put in the work to help make that happen.
We started this journey with our personal funds. Thanks to the generous grants by these funders, we have been able to accomplish more than we dreamed possible. We are honored and humbled that they believe in our goals and continue to trust that we will work tirelessly to provide a safe space for our community and extended communities to gather and learn.
Amidst all the changes we're making to this property, we need to acknowledge those plant relatives that were here when we arrived. We're doing our best to care for the wild berries, wild plums, and medicines that are all around us. We're just beginning to learn about these plants. We want to add an 8-foot wide asphalt path from our driveway through the middle of our main garden area, and then from one side of the garden area to the events area. We also want to convert this main garden area into raised beds. These changes will make this space more accessible to our community members. Not only will this be a safer path for tour groups going through the gardens, those in wheelchairs, walkers, and strollers will have greater access to get up close and personal with the soil, with our seeds, and with the growing plants. Also, they can help with harvest. This is an aerial photo of the main garden area in relation to the driveway and the events area. The black line is the proposed asphalt path. The yellow lines are where we plan to build 3-foot tall raised beds suitable for people needing the assistance of a walker. The red lines are where we plan to build 2-foot raised beds suitable for people in wheelchairs or in strollers.
We have been doing a good job growing, processing, and preserving our foods up to this point. We hope to make meals available to our community using these indigenous foods. By doing this, we hope to expose our community to many different ways to cook with them, to provide easy, affordable access to them, and to truly get those amazing foods into our diets of our community. A seed to stomach path.
Another project we've been talking about for some time is to build a log cabin like the ones our people made in the 17 and 1800s. We talked about either making one from scratch and using the tools they had available at the time, or finding a hidden one in our community like this one that our friends helped to uncover and relocate. Both options would provide an opportunity to involve the community to help and get a glimpse into the lives of the hard work of our ancestors and what it took for them to survive, especially when they were removed here to Wisconsin and had to build from scratch. This would be an excellent teaching tool and allow us to share more of our history with our visitors. We're still learning about our foods. People have different ways of growing our foods. We are sharing the way that we learned how. One of the most amazing parts about this journey to get to know our foods better is that it is connecting us to so many people. We learned that every time an Indigenous person plants a seed, that is an act of resistance, an assertion of sovereignty, and a reclamation of identity.
Though we have a long way to go and a lot to learn, sometimes we have to pause and appreciate how far we've come. Yawanko for listening to our adventure. We would love to hear about your journey with our seed and plant relatives.
Yawa, Donito.